Welcome to the Minotaur's Maze. Today, I'm going to be speaking to Byrne, who is a copywriter and owns an agency. He has a successful group on Facebook with his partner called the Church of Clientology, where they help business owners scale their business using online means. Ben can be contacted on Facebook, but this episode is a little bit different because I'm not going to be interviewing Ben like I do with my previous guests. Today, we're going to have a conversation, which is going to start a little bit on business, but then we're going to move on to some weird spiritual topics and see where the conversation goes. So, Ben, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, man.
So really quickly, just let the audience know what exactly you do from a business perspective with obviously your group and your business.
Yeah, our group, our business right now, most of it is around. It's more of a coaching kind of thing right now. Helping freelancers, agency owners, consultants start, grow, and scale their business.
Okay, and I know you've had some brilliant results recently, so just let the audience know, some of your results that you've had for your clients over the past few weeks and months.
Yeah, we have guys like Kevel, who's gone from 15K per month to 105,000. We have a really cool guy named Robbie. He's like a former trial lawyer, but he had a course that he launched, and he just managed to get acquired for I think somewhere between 350 to 400,000, which is really cool. And we have people who have never sold anything before in their life, work for government jobs their entire life, and I don't know how to sell anything, and they are closing $28,000 deals. It's pretty cool. It's crazy.
So Kevel, he has an SEO agency, if I'm correct. So yeah, obviously you're doing 15 grand a month. What did you do specifically to help him get to 100 grand?
Yeah,
that's 100 a month, by the way, not a year. So that's 50 to 100 grand in a month.
Yeah, there's a few things. The big one is his pricing, which is funny. When he first came to us, we did a few interviews together. In his first case, he's like, I don't think anyone will pay more than $2,000 per month for SEO ever. And he's like, it's impossible. And we're like, okay, well, what if he just tried it, right? So we got him to start, okay, maybe try 3,000. And he's like, oh, someone said yes. And then next thing you know, someone's paying him 15,000 per month. And then he has a few people paying him 25,000 per month now, which it doesn't take many $25,000 per month clients to hit 100K. Just a lot of it was getting him dialed in. He was kind of, I do SEO for everybody. We made him kind of like the mayor of e-com town for SEO, a lot of content strategy there because he already had a bit of a following. So it was actually a lot easier for him to turn that following into, I guess, monetize. It's the word I'm looking for. And some other stuff, having a straightforward sales process, having some stuff in the back end, like building out his team a bit, so it's not all him doing everything.
Okay, and there's a lot of pain out there, and a lot of people are going to be losing their jobs. But just to provide them some hope, I wouldn't say easy, but how simple is it to get started online if you think you've got no skills? I mean, what steps can you take to get started, and then just go from there?
Yeah, so you mentioned a key word, and it's skills. I think of entrepreneurship, it can kind of get a lot of people have different definitions for it, but a lot of it comes down to what are the skills that you can sell to the market, right? Or that are useful for you to grow a business. So, start off by learning something, maybe it's web design, maybe it's SEO, maybe it's email marketing, any kind of skill that you can sell to another business. It's probably a good place to start, right? And you can start off on Udemy for $20. You can start off with books, I got a lot behind me, mini courses. There's a lot of good stuff out there to learn cheap, right? And then that's the delivery side. And then, you also have to know how to like get clients, how to market and sell, create an offer, which is more or less basic stuff. We teach a lot of that in our church of clientology group for free. We have a lot of trainings in there if you want to check that out.
Okay, I mean, we will drop a link to that when this is released. So is there anything you want to add on the business side of things before we take the conversation a different direction?
I think we covered it.
Okay, cool, no worries. Okay, so just to give everyone the heads up. So obviously I put out a lot of content. I've been putting out a lot of content now for the past year or so. And just to give the preamble, like, I put out different types of content. I mean, I teach people to be, focused and niche specific, but I do the opposite myself. Like I put out content about literally anything and everything. And the feel good content, the positive mindset stuff. Now that gets a lot of engagement typically, but then it doesn't lead to anything substantial after that. I mean, you get some, people messaging you there with their hellos, how are you kind of messages, but the deeper stuff, the spiritual stuff, the intellectual stuff, that type of content doesn't get a lot of public engagement, but what it does get is deeper relationships, questions and conversations in the DMs. And a few weeks ago, I put out some posts about some spiritual stuff, and it got no engagement. But then Ben contacted me on the DMs, and then for the past couple of months, I think we've been going back and forward now, about stuff which isn't really mainstream. There's aliens, there's spirituality stuff, there's history, and all this esoteric stuff. But we've developed a little bit of a relationship without really getting to know each other that well. But it's been interesting. And then on the back of that, we thought, well, let's just do a podcast and talk about this stuff and see where it goes. So there's no preempted plan, there's no strategy, there's no goal here. It's just to come on and talk. And I guess the point that I'm trying to make is, people worry about what content they should be putting out, but what you've got to realize is the most engaging content might not be the best content, or it might not lead to anything, whereas the content you think might not have any response or engagement actually leads to something later on. I mean, how did you see, or how was it for you, or what got you here on this call?
It was exactly what you said. I read one of your posts. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'm gonna message you about that. You bring up a good point. We have in our minds like, oh, I'm gonna write the perfect post or make the perfect video, and it's like crickets when you launch it, and you're like, what the hell? And you write something weird, and it blows up. I can't remember exactly what your post was about. Maybe
there were several.
Aliens or there were quite a few. Yeah.
So I think the first one might have been when I said something that it's okay to talk about weird things. Like the weird things that I'm interested in is astral projection, spirituality,
yes,
EMP, and then I think you commented on that one saying I think you gave a book recommendation, and then we've had quite a few conversations since then. I suppose where to start off with is what do you follow any particular faith? Do you have any beliefs? I mean, what is your worldview on just a basic level?
Just to start with an easy question, what's your entire worldview? I love it. I guess I was raised to believe in like Christian stuff. My dad made me. I remember being a little kid reading, like, he got me the picture Bible, and I was always kind of like against it. I remember being a little kid and reading weird stuff in there, like inconsistencies I noticed, like, oh, it's like Adam and Eve when they left the Garden of Eden. Suddenly they had a whole bunch of kids, and then there are all these people. I was like, weren't they the first two people? Like, so is everyone just like incest? And my dad's like, you can't ask that, right? So I don't know. Around like, I think I stopped going to church when I was like maybe 10, when they stopped forcing me to go. So maybe until 10 to 20, until age of 20, I didn't think about any kind of spiritual stuff at all. And then I don't know. I moved across the country, and I met my aunt, who was really big into yoga and stuff like that. And she gave me a few books, which kind of opened my mind to a lot of weird stuff, which is kind of the start to, I guess, this conversation today.
Okay. So I mean, do you have any religious inclinations now then, or are you just like a free spirit? I mean, what is, I suppose, what when you think of spirituality and do you
Yeah.
practice anything yourself, or do you do any rituals? What do you do, or what do you think
Right.
about the whole thing?
Yeah. I don't know. My favorite definition of spirituality is connecting to a greater whole, right? When you say like rituals and stuff, I don't really do anything too crazy. I have read a book. It's not around me. I've been practicing the exercises in it. It's called the Silva Mind Control Method. Which have you heard of that?
I'm sure that's the book you recommended. I think I've got it in my basket, but I haven't actually ordered it yet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's that's a cool one. It kind of died off, but apparently it was a really big thing. Like 500,000 people have gone through it from like 1960 to 1980, I think, and it kind of disappeared. But I randomly found it. Really interesting stuff. It's not like mind control. It's like, oh, is it like weird? But it's controlling your own mind. I think that's the idea. So there's some exercises that you can do in there. I don't have any crazy practices. So what about you? How did you get into all this stuff? I'm actually curious.
I'm a Muslim. So I was born a Muslim, grew up a Muslim. So the central belief is there's one God, and then the Quran is the book of God, and Muhammad, may peace be upon him, was the final messenger of God. However, before him, Jesus was a prophet of God. Moses was a prophet of God, and all the prophets of the other religions, they were all prophets of God. And Islam and the Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him, was the final messenger, which was just carrying on the message of the previous religions. In Islam, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, I'll just explain this. We say peace be upon him because as a sign of respect, and we say it for all of the prophets. But I'm going to say it silently from now just to make the conversation flow a bit better. So the Prophet Muhammad was the seal of the prophets, meaning he was the final prophet. And the whole message really was there's only one God, the creator of the universe, the absolute. And we pray, we worship to God. Now, in terms of religion, I mean, obviously there's so many different sects, there's so many different viewpoints, there's so many, even within the same religion itself, there's so many different denominations. So in the Christian world, you might have Catholics, you might have Protestants, and then you might have, Jehovah's, and then you might have, obviously the different sects inside the religion itself. And Islam is no different, it's got that as well. So the issue today is religion seems to be more a dogmatic practice. People just read without really understanding. They get told what to do, and it's not even just religion. I think that's just the world we live in right now. It's the education system, the whole world. You get told what to do, you do it, and we really lack, I'd say, critical thinking in today's society, not just in religion, but just generally. And people don't critically think when it comes to religion anymore. And one of the core lessons of Islam is to critically think. So the Quran was, this book was created for you to think. It's for people who think, but we live in an age where people don't think. And then I suppose the biggest problem today is obviously spirituality is a key part of religion, but for Islam especially, it's not just being spiritual, it's about being practical in the material world as well. So other religions before, they might be tailored more towards spirituality and completely neglecting the material world, whereas other philosophies will be completely neglecting spirituality and focusing purely on the material world, whereas Islam was a combination of both. Yes, you do need the spiritual life, but then you have all the rules and regulations to live a practical life. And the whole point is, under my understanding, is the whole point of worshiping God is you do these practices, you do these things to become the best version of yourself, to help your community, to help your family and friends. You basically make the world a better place. So one of the things that Islam lays down is you are a guardian of the earth, you are a vicegerent of the earth. So you need to protect the earth, you need to protect people, and then you obviously move on into the next life, and obviously there's heaven and hell, depending on what you did in this life. Now, obviously, a lot of people think heaven and hell is a location that, once you die, you're going to go and burn into fire and this and that and the other. Possibly. I mean, I don't know, obviously, but there, even in Islam itself, there are the spiritual side and the Sufis, they call them Sufis, and there's other spiritual side of Islam. And they say these are actually allegories. They're not physical things. They're this symbolism. It's allegory. And, one of my favorite poets is, he was a philosopher as well, and his name was Allama Iqbal. And he said, heaven and hell aren't locations. They are states of the soul. They are states of mind. Hell is man's painful realization of his failures in life. And heaven is the joy of triumph. In other words, if you live a good life, if your soul is happy and great, you're gonna experience heaven. That's the feeling of the experience. Whereas if you live a life which is not good, the experience of hell is the painful realization of, your failures in life, and in that the burning desire of regret of, I wish I lived differently, or I wish I did things differently, etc., etc. So there's obviously a lot of material, and then I suppose even when I was about 19, 20 as well, I started looking at other philosophies as well. I read about Christianity, Buddhism, Judaism, but even the New Age religion stuff. So the New Age religion is more, we're all God. That's their belief that everyone's got a piece of God in them. They're all God. Or they might say there is no God. We are all God, or you are God, and etc. And although it didn't sit with me that well, obviously the way I look at these stuff is I read these philosophies and I find similarities in all of them. And what I found is ultimately it's the same message across the board, but it's just different names, or there's slightly different practices. I mean, the New Age, instead of calling God, they say there's the universe, or I'm taking my power from the universe. Well, it's the same kind of thing. It's just energy. And I think all of these philosophies and religions, it comes down to energy. And obviously, even from the scientific world, we know everything is energy. And earlier on I said about rituals. And the reason I said rituals is because, people think of ritual as some kind of voodoo stuff where you put on hoods and you light a candle and then you chant things, and that is a ritual, which is in the satanic tradition. But even in the religious traditions, for example, when Muslims pray, they do something that's called wuzu, which is ablution. So they wash their face and their arms. That's a ritual. And then when you're praying, I'm sure you've seen it, they're praying, that's a ritual. And then even when Christians go to mass, that's a ritual. So a ritual doesn't have to be a satanic kind of thing. It's just a thing that you do to get yourself in a state of mind. And
right.
And then from there, I read a lot of so I used to be into a lot of conspiracy theories around about the same time, and even they're crazy. So they've got spiritual elements involved in them, and obviously when you read history, you read spirituality, you read religions, it's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. So if you read it individually, it might be interesting, but it doesn't really make sense. But when you read all of them, you kind of think, okay, that makes sense. You put that together, and it kind of all fits together. And I just find that stuff interesting, and it was one of those things where I still got raised in a typical Western education system where you had to go to school, you had to get a degree, you had to become a professional. But because I was reading all of this other stuff, I'm like, is this it? Is this all there is to life? Is there nothing more to this? And although I carried on with the legal career, with all of that stuff, there was always this emptiness and this longing for more. There has to be more to life. And I found that from all the spiritual books that I read, which moved not just to spiritual stuff, but it moved on to aliens, interdimensional beings, stargates, wormholes, so the whole shebang kind of thing. So that's pretty much where it started and where I'm at now.
Okay, wow. To unpack there, man. You brought up some interesting, you brought a lot of interesting stuff. One thing that I thought was in particular, you said the difference between Muslim, where it's like, hey, you guys are guardians of the earth. You're here to protect the earth. Do you think that since a lot of in the West, it's a lot of Christianity based, where it's more like, you guys are kind of sinners. You're here to do your time, and then you're off to heaven, hopefully, or hell. So it's like, who really cares what we do with the earth? That's probably a reason why there's so much pollution and people just, neglecting the environment and all that stuff. This is kind of a random side topic, something I thought of.
With religions, it's difficult because, like I said, Muslims believe in Jesus as a prophet of God. So the Muslim name for Jesus is Isa. What Muslims don't believe is that Jesus is the Son of God. They believe he was a messenger of God. He was a human being, but he was more. They call him the ruler, which is the spirit of God. So he was more spiritual. And I suppose what it is obviously when the prophets came. So Moses again was a prophet. He brought down religious books, the Torah. Jesus came with the Bible. As time goes by, the message gets lost. It gets mistranslated, and then a new prophet comes and gives the message again, and then humanity kind of disintegrates, and then a new prophet came, etc., etc. So that's what happened with the prophets. But then, like I said, Muhammad was the final messenger, but he was teaching the same message that Jesus was, that Moses was, before it got distorted. And there's an argument to be had that possibly the message of Islam today is lost. And this is why I think I mentioned to you in private. There's a lot of talk of now being the end times, because all of these three major religions talk about the end of days, the Armageddon, the doomsday scenario. And what I found interesting is even in the spiritual world, the new age religions that don't really particularly believe in any religion or any God, they're talking about a great awakening coming, and we're living in this time where there's a great awakening and there's a massive shift, or we're moving into a new age. And then if you just take a look at what's happening in the world right now, I mean, there's a lot of craziness, and nobody can really explain it. But when you read the spiritual and the religious books, it does kind of fit with what they're seeing.
I read a stat about, you mentioned awakening, which I thought, if you look back at 100 years ago today, I think maybe 2% of the world, I think that was the number, maybe even less, probably less, actively meditated. But now it's up to like 15% or maybe more, right? Which maybe that's having an effect. Who knows? One of my favorite books is The Levels of Energy by Frederick Dodson. Have you read those?
I haven't read it. I've heard it. I've come across it. So a lot of people do mention that, and I've seen the chart that he talks about. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, actually, another one that's very similar is Power versus Force. And I read that, and they measured the entire spectrum of human consciousness from 0 all the way up to 1,000. 1,000 is like Jesus, Buddha, maybe Muhammad, and then 200 is kind of, it's like where it's everything below that's negative, and right above that it goes 200 is neutral, and then it goes more and more positive, right? And they said the world in the past like 3 decades went from 190 to 200, and if we didn't, they said we would have just blown each other up from like with nukes. But I think maybe one of the elements of people meditating has an effect on the entire consciousness. And another book that we were talking about, which is totally out there, I think you said you didn't actually read it, but it was called The Book of Ra, which is should we go down this weird rabbit hole?
Totally, go for it. So I didn't read it all. You obviously read it all. So just quickly explain what the book is about, what you got from it, what your interpretation of it was. Maybe not your opinion, but what you read and what the book was saying.
Yeah. So the book was written in 1982. There was 3 people. They were, I think they were trying to contact alien life through meditation and stuff. And I'm not sure exactly how it happened, but they started channeling an entity. It's called Ra. Kind of like in Egypt, they had a god. Ra, I think, was the god of the sun. Anyway, this is like an alien. They were from Venus. And basically the book is the transcripts. They were asking questions to this Ra person, while the person was like, one person was in a trance and she was speaking through her body. So yeah, like a lot of, you mentioned a lot of the end time stuff too. And in the book, they say that our entire reason why we're here, they call it like third density, right? It's like third dimensions, third density. I think it's kind of related, is to like evolve. Basically, there's like two paths. There's like positive and negative, right? So positive is like service to others, and negative is service to self. And they said that one of the reasons why you hear all these cults that are like, oh, the world's going to end in like 2021, or like you hear all these doomsday prophecies, it's from like negative entities from higher dimensions who are basically transmitting negative messages to like prophets and stuff. And these people get a big following, and then they're like, the world's going to end in like on January 25th, 2021. And then it doesn't happen. And then they get discredited. And I'm sure I had a different point why I started talking about this Ra book, but I thought it was totally interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, I came across the Book of Ra. So I read, I think I sent you the link. I don't know if you read the link. So I basically saw a link to a forum, which was written about, I think it was in 2008, so about 13 years ago. And I'm not saying I believe any of this stuff. I just found it very interesting, and I took some points from it, which was quite, which were quite good. So the forum, I think it was above top secret, and some random person, anonymous person called the Hidden Hand wrote out this really long post, and he said, he or she, I don't know, it might have been a female, but he basically said that he is a member of one of the ruling bloodlines in the world, and that they've been chosen, and they've been running the world for hundreds of thousands of years, and they, so in the conspiracy circles, you hear about the 13 Illuminati bloodlines, and you hear about the Rothschild, the Rockefellers, etc., etc. And what this individual was saying, he was a part of one of the 13 bloodlines, but the 13 bloodlines were not just humans. There were other entities from different dimensions, from higher dimensions, and basically there's so many different dimensions and densities and whatnot. And he was saying they were either chosen, or they chose to come back into the third density of Earth, and to deliberately create negativity and discord, because that's what's needed to raise humans, or give humans the necessary challenge to overcome their spiritual station. So humans are on the third density. For humans to move into the fourth or fifth or sixth density, they have to go through certain challenges, and they have to overcome certain negative events. And these evil, if you want to call it, negative entities, these they're deliberately here to create the negative circumstances for humans to overcome. So they move over into the next density or higher, you can call it spiritual ascension. So basically they're there to help humans spiritually ascend to the next level. And he mentioned, it was the Book of Ra mentioning that. So this individual, he was saying that, they, as part of the rules, they have to come down and answer questions, and if they get the appropriate question, they will give the right answer. And obviously half the people were taking piss out of him. Obviously they were skeptical. Most people will be skeptical about this. I'm skeptical about it, but he was dropping a lot of knowledge. Even if you don't believe in what he was saying, there was still a lot of philosophical insight. There was a lot of personal development insight, and it was a really, really long forum and a really long conversation. But ultimately, that's where I came across the Book of Ra, and again, what I saw from that is, again, the patterns of similarity. So it's about spiritual ascension, and that's what religion, for me, especially Islam, is spiritual ascension. You come to this world to purify your soul, to purify your heart. You do good deeds, and it's the good deeds that purify your heart and purify your soul. So you mentioned it, service to self and service to others. So one of the core tenets about the faith of Islam is you don't be selfish. You use yourself to serve others. That's the whole point of being a viceroy, not being a guardian of the earth. So the similarities are all there. So it's about doing good deeds and then elevating your soul and yourself to the next level in the afterlife. And that's what where I came across the Book of Ra. And obviously there's the other end of the spectrum. I mean, what people don't understand is, people talk about good and evil. There's a philosophical argument to be had. If there was no evil, there'd be no good. So if you didn't have the evil in the world, you wouldn't be able to do any good deeds. So you kind of need evil to do good. And then there's the other side of the argument where, people, let's just take Satanists, for example, or Luciferians. So everybody thinks the devil is evil, Satan is evil, especially if you're coming from the religious background. However, there are people who worship Satan. There are people who call themselves Luciferians, but they don't see themselves as evil. They don't see themselves as, causing harm. Luciferians say that the word Lucifer means bringer of light. And they say that, Lucifer was in fact cast out of God's grace because he was trying to protect humans, and he's the bringer of light, and by following his teachings, that's how you're gonna approach light. And obviously everyone's got different opinions and different viewpoints and perceptions. But even if, I guess what I'm trying to say is, even people who follow Lucifer are still talking about the same kind of thing, is coming from darkness towards light. And I think that's the theme that's across the board.
Yeah. I think there's a great book, I think it's called The Parallel Teachings of Jesus, Buddha, and Lao Tzu. And it's just literally it has this, what Jesus said and what Buddha said and what Lao Tzu said, and how basically they're all saying the exact same thing. It's just in different ways, different times, right? They should probably had like a Muhammad in there. It's probably more of the same. The whole Lucifer, bringer of light thing, I think they even talk about that in the Book of Ra. It's like the whole purpose, I think, of life in general is this constant evolution, getting greater and greater, becoming more and more. I think that's kind of what spirituality is kind of about, maybe, right? People can have their own definitions for it. And, my personal beliefs are, I don't really think so much of heaven and hell, but I think, when we die, it's maybe it's just another evolution, what's next, right? Does it just never end? Because, if you study enough, far out there books, they'll talk about the other bodies, right? You have your physical body and the mental body and astral and etheric and all these things that, when you die, your physical body disappears, but something else keeps going. And one of my favorite things, to research is the stories of little kids who get, when they're born, they start to talk about their past lives. And it's oh, I was a pilot and my name was Jim Larson and I was flying and I crashed, and their parents are you're crazy. And then they start giving all these crazy details that the kid would just have no idea, where they where did you hear this from? And they go and look, and it was a real person.
Okay.
Yeah. Have you ever
I mean, not those stories, but obviously you come across reincarnation. I think that's more in the Buddhist or Hindu traditions. They talk a lot about reincarnation and past lives. I suppose, I've done a little study, so I'm not sure exactly, but I think the concept there is you come into this world to spiritually progress. If you don't, then you get reincarnated to get another go at it, and that cycle keeps happening until you've learned the lessons that you need to do, and then you've progressed to the next level, which again is similar to the Book of Ra, or moving up density. So I don't know how to explain densities to people that haven't, read the material, because I mean, we haven't even touched upon the CIA document that I sent you.
Oh yes, yeah, that's true.
So that was quite crazy. So I put a post out, I think it was a couple of months ago now. So the CIA actually did an experiment, or I don't know, they did some research into an experiment, the Gateway experiment, and they looked at a lot of astral projection and different dimensions. And if I recall correctly, what they were saying is there's different densities, there's different dimensions. So I guess in the religious tradition, it's the seven heavens. So you've got the seven heavens, and then right at the top, you've got the absolute source of all things, the universe or God. So all of these are just different, basically the source of all life, which permeates everything, and then everything is inside the source, the different dimensions. And then we humans, we're on the lowest dimensions, the third dimension or the third density. And it's possible for humans to experience the higher dimensions through meditation, through visualization, and I suppose psychedelic drugs, which then brings you onto the area of, ayahuasca and DMT trips. Because the first time I came across, I mean, this is completely separate now from the CIA document and whatnot, but one of the books I read about 10, 15 years ago was the, DMT, the spirit molecule, by Dr. Rick Strassman. And that was basically a scientist who was trying to research this drug called DMT. And DMT, you can get it from plants like, I think, ayahuasca and plants like that. And if you inject it in people, they start having these hallucinations and vivid visualizations. I think some of the people that we're connected to on Twitter, they've actually gone ahead and had ayahuasca trips. They've actually gone and done these ceremonies. I know Ajax Alexander Cortez, I had him on the podcast. He talked about his experience with it. And there's other people that have done it. And what I found interesting about that book was when he did the experiments. So so Dr. Rick Strassman, his assertion is that DMT can be taken from external sources, but it can also be released from the pineal gland in the human brain. And the way to do that is from intense meditation, intense spiritual practice, which then connects it to all the religious and spiritual stuff as well. But I suppose that's a separate point. But what I found interesting was he said that the experience people had, the trip had, depended on their state. So people that were stressed out, anxious, worried, when they had this DMT experience, they had a nightmare. They were frightened. They saw awful things. Whereas those that were of a positive mindset, were happy, they saw beautiful things, which I suppose it goes back to what I was saying earlier about heaven and hell being states of the mind. So people who are full of anxiety, stress, they're going to feel negative energies and negative experiences. Where people who are happy and content and at peace, they're going to experience obviously positive experiences. I mean, have you come across DMT or ayahuasca and stuff like that? Or?
I've never taken either of them, but yeah, I'm definitely familiar with them, and obviously Joe Rogan never shuts up about DMT. So yeah, I know all about them. Like the biggest buzzword now is plant medicine. They're like, oh, I'm going to do plant medicine, which is just another word for going to go trip out in the desert or the forest, the jungle or something. I was going to mention when you brought up that CIA document, because it kept showing these diagrams of Itzhak Bentov. And I have one of his books here somewhere. Oh, here it is. This Itzhak Bentov guy his book's really cool. It's called Stalking the Wild Pendulum. He's I don't know how to describe him. He's like, I had a grade 4 education. I dropped out of school, but he actually, I think he created the pacemaker. He created all these inventions, but he was also into some weird shit similar to us. He's like, his book's actually really, really interesting, and obviously cited in the CIA document that you were talking about with the Stargates and the different dimensions.
The CIA document, I mean, there were quite a lot of I can't even remember half the stuff now. There's a lot of crazy stuff. Do you remember any of the other crazy stuff that came out of that document? Remote viewing, was it? Was it
remote viewing? Yeah, remote viewing was a big one. I read another book. I can't remember exactly what the name was. Something about ESP by a guy named Russell Targ. I think that was the book I actually recommended.
Yeah.
And Russell Targ, they founded, I think it was called the SRI. Essentially, it was the government's remote viewing kind of institute. They want to spy on the Soviets during the Cold War, right? And they were really successful at it. So Russell Targ was the guy who was running it. He has all these stories about these really, really gifted psychics that he would work with. One was a former cop, I think, around San Francisco. There's another one. This guy didn't work with him, but he kept writing in letters, and I thought he was crazy. He called him. I can't remember what his name is now, but he has a book called The PK Man, which is all about him. And he's like, I am the most powerful psychic in the world. He kept sending in letters, and he's like, I'll prove it. There's a huge drought going on in California at the time. And he's like, in 3 days, I'm going to fix this drought. It's going to be raining. There's going to be slush and crazy weather. Power is going to go out, like rolling blackouts, and people are going to see UFOs. And they're like, okay, whatever. I think they were probably using typewriters back then, or like telegraphs. Anyway, 3 days later, it started happening. The drought ended, and they're like, wow, that was a good coincidence, or that was a great prediction. And the guy's like, it wasn't a prediction, I caused it. And they're like, okay, well, I think like 8 months later, the same thing was happening in London. There's a huge drought. They had to ship water into the city in big container trucks. And they said, if you want to look crazy, just walk down the street with an umbrella, because it hasn't rained in like months. So he's like, okay, in 3 days, same thing. It's going to rain like crazy, power outages, wild weather, and people will see aliens. Like, people will report seeing aliens. I don't know. And it happened. So I guess they were at like a big football game or something, like thousands of people in the stadium, and they looked up and they seen a huge, like, everyone's seen this like UFO thing, but there's like, was it this guy, or
was it a stage thing? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I mean, obviously UFO aliens, the conspiracy theories have been around for a long time. But last year, I think official news sources and official sources, I think, what was it, the NSA or the FBI, they said, a lot of articles came out last year from official sources that aliens exist, UFOs exist. I think there was that the recent one was one of the Israeli intelligence was saying there are aliens, but the world's not ready for it, etc., etc. In terms of aliens, I suppose, like, personally, I don't know. I mean, I don't believe in the gray, the Martians, the green Martians, alien kind of thing. But in Islam, there's in the Quran, it talks about jinn. So jinn, obviously being the root word for genie. So that's where you get the genie in the lamp kind of thing, the three wishes. So jinn are basically, how to describe it? Basically, they are other beings which exist at the same time as humans, but possibly in a different dimension. And Muslims are prohibited from trying to interact with jinn. So black magic and that kind of thing. So to basically, there's a lot of stuff going on in the black magic realm. But when you think of demonic possession and stuff like that, it's put on in the Muslim belief. It'll be jinn overtaking a human's body and that kind of thing. Now, what I find interesting about jinn is the description is they are made of smokeless fire.
Smokeless fire, yeah.
Smokeless fire. So when you think of smokeless fire, I mean, obviously it's down to your interpretation, but one of the interpretation of smokeless fire is electricity, so a different form of energy. Yeah, so when I think of aliens, I just think it's probably these jinn beings or interdimensional beings, but they're just called aliens, and they can possess humans, demonic possession. And you know, if you look at the Hollywood cult Satanists, there's a lot of talk about, you know, it might be in the conspiracy circle, but there's a lot of talk about demonic possession in the music industry, in the movie industry. And all of these music videos, they're just rituals, and all these concert performances, they're all just rituals. I mean, have you looked much into that yourself? Are you aware of
I have to admit, I have not looked into these music performances being demonic rituals, but you never know. Yeah.
No, look it up.
I've heard a lot of weird shit about Hollywood. That's for sure. It's interesting though. Like what comes to mind is a story from actually the Book of Ra about, you talk about possession. This is like a different kind of possession, but they talked about Abraham Lincoln. Like apparently in 18, I think the Civil War started in 65 maybe, or maybe 1860, something like that. Before, in sometime in the 1850s, they said that Abraham Lincoln was basically fed up with life. He wasn't a type though to commit suicide. So he had, in a dream, a being came to him and was like, hey, if you want, I'll take over your body and I'll do all these things that you wanted to do. And you'll just go to another dimension. It's kind of like a holding area until your body dies, and then you'll go off somewhere else. And he was like, okay. And like they told the story, which is like way out there, totally weird in that book. I'm not sure if it was a djinn, but yeah, maybe people think they're seeing aliens, but they're just kind of spirits or something. It's hard to explain. There's so much stuff out there we don't know, right?
So do you believe in aliens or jinns or interdimensional beings, or what's your belief, or is it more skeptical but intrigued and interested by it?
Like aliens and, well, here's the thing. Like with aliens, like I think it's crazy to think that in the size of the universe that we live in, that there's no other intelligent life. First of all, you think about it, just in the Milky Way galaxy alone, I think there's 100 billion stars, you know, like ours. And again, they gave some statistics in the Book of Ra. I think they said 32% of all stars have planets and 10% of all planets have life of some sort, right? So if you do the math, 100 billion times 32, whatever, it's something like, it's a lot. It's like millions and millions of planets with possible life, right? So there's that, you know. And I remember my dad used to tell me when I was a kid, it's like, think about how much progress we've made in the past 20 years since we invented a computer and the internet, right? And like, imagine if there was a society out there that invented the computer like 1 million years ago, right? Like, where would they be? And, you know, like I for sure think I think it's kind of dumb not to. I don't have any real proof. Obviously the government's like, hey, we there's aliens, but we were in the middle of the pandemic, and it's like, we don't care. You know? So yeah, I think there are. As far as entities and stuff, I mean, maybe I've had weird experiences with stuff, which we can go into.
Of course, go. Absolutely, fire away.
Yeah, so when I was 20, we were living in this like 120-year-old farmhouse way out in the country, and all kinds of weird stuff happened, right? For example, we had this it started off small with little things, right? Like we had a hot tub and the power kept going out, right? And we called the plumber, and he'd come and he'd open up the grate, and all the cords were unplugged. And he's like, was someone messing with this? Right? Or like, I don't think so. It's inside the house. And like, no one was in the house. It's like, okay, that's weird. And then we had one of those, like a 10-gallon water jug thing, which is completely full of water. And we all drove like 2 hours into the city. When they came back, it was completely empty. There was no water anywhere. I'd be sitting on the computer, like in the office, and I see the doorknob turn, and there's just open up. And we're like,
Oh,
I was like, hello? Yeah. And it was like, was that the wind? Like, there's no one there. It's like, okay, that's weird. And then like, I remember it so clearly. It was like 2 a.m. middle of the night. I was up, and there was these old creepy stairs. I would walk up to the I was walking up to the top of the stairs, and as soon as I got to the top, I heard my dad's voice. He goes, Ben. I'm like, what? And I was like, I see. And then I thought I'd seen someone go into like the spare bedroom. I thought it was my dad playing a trick on me or something. I was like, I see you in there. And I kind of like went in and flicked on the light, and there's no one there. It's like, what the hell? And I kind of like walked around all of the stairs. I was like, I 100% heard like something say my name. And then I like went to bed, and I was sitting there like, I was like, okay, it must have just been my imagination, but I had like the creepiest feeling, like someone was like staring at me. If I open my eyes, I'm going to see someone. It's like, and I never really told my my dad or his wife about it. And then years later, when like they had already moved out of that place, my dad's wife was really into spiritual stuff as well, and she had a friend come when they first moved into that place, who was like a medium or something like that. And I guess when she was walking up to the top of the stairs, same stairs, I heard this noise. She got halfway up and immediately just threw up on the stairs. And they're like, oh, what the hell? And she's like, there is like an evil entity at the top of the stairs. And like this was like years after. I didn't even know about this. I was like, what the hell? It was pretty creepy. So is there stuff out there that we don't know? I would 100% say yes.
Cool. So, I mean, there's obviously so much to unpack in all of this. There's so many. I suppose this. I mean, I don't know for the audience. Are we doing a regular thing here, or are we just seeing how this one goes and see if we get any questions, or are we just doing it just because we like it anyway? So regardless of what the response is, because like I said, there's so much. When we haven't even talked about the Egypt, the history.
Yes, yeah, that's true.
Obviously the Greek gods as well. They're probably jinn or whatever, or they might just be legends. And we haven't even talked about astral projection from not talking about ghosts or aliens and stuff like that, because I was fascinated by astral projection about 10, 15 years ago. And I did try it. And astral projection is, for those that don't know, it's basically your soul leaving your body, and then your soul's just out in the astral plane flying around. Now, I never actually achieved it. I did a lot of visualization. I used to have a lot of body sensation. I used to put in, the meditation music, normally Enigma or Hans Zimmer Last Samurai soundtrack or something like that. And then I used to visualize my soul leaving from the temple. Never quite happened. But what did happen was I ended up having a lot of lucid dreams around that period. So I dream, I'd be aware of dreaming, and I would control my dreams to a certain extent. I'd control flying to a certain place, and I remember seeing different worlds and different moons and different planets and the dreams were just awesome, and especially when you can control some aspect of them. Obviously I didn't have total control, but I used to enjoy going to sleep just so I could have them dreams. And then you used to wake up, and then you've got to go to work. It's like and you start to like kind of depressed, like, is this all there is? No, I am certain there is more to life than this. I'm experiencing it. But I suppose at the same time, I was praying a lot. So I used to pray my 5 daily prayers. So in Islam, you've got the 5 daily prayers. So you pray 5 times a day. And I was going to the gym, so I was exercising a lot. I suppose that was the greatest spiritual state that I was in. And then once I got back into full-time employment and work, the whole practice just fell off. I stopped going to the gym. I didn't pray that much, didn't meditate that much, and then I suppose it got blocked off. So intuition, creativity, the whole thing, it just went away. And I've had glimpses of it, and I suppose the closest was when I did 75 hard. I got into some real flow state doing 75 hard. And I suppose the other interesting thing is we haven't talked about the scientific side. So, quantum physics, the quantum field. If you look at the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, again, this is nothing to do with spirituality. It's just science, and the similarities between what's being put out in the scientific field with the spiritual and the religion. It's not, for me, it's not a coincidence anymore. There's obviously more out there, which when you're in the rat race, when you're waking up to go to a depressing job, working.
Yeah, it's like, what is the point of all this spiritual stuff when you're like another day?
You come home and all you're bothered about, you're stressed about the next paycheck. You're worried about flipping traffic, getting work done. And I suppose you're blocked up. And I suppose the other thing we haven't even talked about is the chakra system, the energy points in the body. I don't know how much there's so much out there. So I don't know. It's up to you. Do you want to do these?
I've studied a lot. Yeah. So I'm down. Yeah, for sure. If people want to know, I mean, if they're interested in hearing about it, yeah, for sure. It's funny. Ryan and I, my business partner Ryan, we did a podcast similar to this. He was about to start a podcast, but then just kind of went away. But anyway, I got a lot of similar to you. What's that?
He's kind of disappeared off. I used to see a lot of his content. Has he gone quiet?
Yeah. He's like sick of being in the public eye. He might be back. Yeah, totally. Anyway, we made a podcast where we talked about stuff that was kind of out there, spirituality and stuff. And I got a lot of messages like, hey, like, I didn't know you were in this stuff. Like, I really love hearing about this and would like to hear more of it. Which I thought was from people too who were like, business people, and you wouldn't think that they were into that. It's funny.
I suppose I think that comes down to your content. Obviously, your content is mainly focused on business and strategy. And I suppose I wouldn't have known either until I put that content out. You responded, and I'm having the same experience with other people as well. So, like I said, there's not a lot of engagement publicly, but in private, I'm getting messages. I'm actually interested in this. Why? I mean, and I ask people, why don't you put this content out? And people are like, I don't think it's. I never really thought about it. I just don't think it's relevant. But I think a lot more people are interested in it, and I think there is going to be a return to spiritual practice, even religious practice. I think religion is going to come. Obviously, religion has been vilified over the last 100 years. But I think there is going to be a return to religion, especially with what's happening now. I think COVID has made a lot of people realize that the bubble or the matrix that they were living in, it's collapsed. There has to be more. They need something more to fall back on. So I think a lot more people are interested. But even if they're not, like, I'm happy to do this just because it's interesting. So
me too.
Yeah. So I mean, anything else? I mean, should we wrap it up here, or do you want to talk?
Yeah. Well, I had stories about Joe Dispenza and stuff, and how I read one of his books and it actually impacted my life.
So let's just go.
But I think it comes down. This stuff all comes down to like, why, is it just interesting, or is it actually important? Is there practical aspects of this? Like, how can this improve my life in my business, if possible? The Joe Dispenza story is actually relevant to that. But for you said it like 3 times now. There has to be something more to this, and that's what I realized back when I was 20. Just to kind of, for anyone who's like, well, maybe there's like, this sounds kind of interesting, but like, why should I care, right? And I did this thought experiment. It's like, okay, like what do I want in life? And I was like, okay, imagine I just became the richest person in the world, right? And I had everything I want materially. It's like, what then? I was like, okay, I got everything I wanted ever. It's like, well, what else is there? Like, for me, that was really what kind of made me curious and start interested, like looking into other stuff. At the same time, like I said, my aunt, I just met her. She gave me a few books. I don't have, they're over there. Like Autobiography of a Yogi, which, is a book I've read like probably like 100 times, really opened my eyes to all this. But to finish up, I guess my story about the Joe Dispenza, I love his books, and I think he's done a really good job of combining the woo-woo stuff with science and kind of making it relatable, right? So yeah, I remember I read his book, and it was all about, it's like, if you can create the feeling in your body of what you want to happen before it happens, like you're some, I'm not sure if it's like a law of attraction thing, but
yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, I was just about to say that. I think basically it takes the law of attraction to the next level. I mean, the law of attraction, obviously, that got famous from the book The Secret.
yeah,
I suppose that was the more mainstream thing, but that kind of new age stuff that was going around before then. And the thing with The Secret was, I mean, it's a great book. Like, it makes you feel good, but it's fluff, you know.
yeah, I've never read it.
It doesn't give you the practical application. You just say, you know, visualize, you're going to get $1 million, and then $1 million is going to come in the post. It doesn't quite work like that. I think that's more, the Secret was more commercialized, but when you look behind the scenes, if you look at the science, the quantum field, what Joe Dispenza talks about, obviously it's not just as simple as visualization and that's it. It's visualization, focus, and then taking action. And you know, it's funny that you mentioned the autobiography of a yogi. Now, I haven't read that book myself, but I am aware that it's probably Steve Jobs' favorite book, and I think there's a story that on his funeral he gave everybody a copy of that book. So you know, I suppose people are interested, but they don't talk about it because there is a fear of the reaction. Now, I would be lying to say that I don't care what people think because I do. And you know, I mean, not to the extent where I completely change my behavior, but I suppose a lot of people see this stuff as crazy. Like, I mean, I know back in the day when I used to be heavy into this stuff, and I was seen as a weirdo, like, you know, I was an outcast kind of thing. And it wasn't until I started talking about football and making money and stuff like that where I started to get involved in groups kind of thing. So I suppose people don't talk about it as much because they have a feeling of being judged, that people might think they're weird and whatnot. Personally, I don't really care that much anymore anyway. But a few years ago, I did care about it. Having said that, I think a lot more people are more open to it because of the internet. And you know, you've got corners of the internet where people only talk about this kind of stuff. And the business world, obviously, I've got a heavy corporate background and being a lawyer and stuff, and this stuff just doesn't get talked about at all. and I suppose professionals and lawyers, they would look down on this stuff. They'd snigger at it. So, but having said that, I know there's quite a lot of professionals who are into this stuff. They just don't talk about it. So I suppose the more we talk about it, it might encourage other people to. But even if they don't talk about it, I find it interesting. I find it a lot more interesting than business and strategy. And I suppose, you know, one of my goals is to have an income where it's almost on autopilot. It's almost, you know, I suppose when people talk about you know, creating freedom and income today, they talk about, oh, you need to have an online business to create freedom. But people don't want freedom because what are you going to do once you've got freedom? There's something you want to do once you've got freedom. And what is it that you want to do when you have that freedom? And for me, it's reading books and delving into spiritual practices and finding out what else is out there. I mean, obviously for other people, it's just about getting rich and getting all the nice cars and stuff like that. And that's fine. But for me, I want all of that stuff to spend more time on this other stuff. And obviously family and spending time with my children is a big part of that. But again, it's about reading my books and delving more into the spiritual practice. And I suppose that's why I've never really been money oriented. But then again, I understand how important it is. So I'm not against money. Obviously, there's a lot of people that if you're spiritual, you're anti-money and money is evil and this and that. I don't hold that view. I think money is important. It's neutral. Whether it's evil or good depends on your intention. How did you acquire it? How are you going to use it? But yeah, I mean, have more conversations, put more I would encourage you to put out more content as well, because I think I asked you last week, how come you don't put any content out? And I think you said you've never really thought about it.
Yeah, you know what? I had a thought like a month ago. I was like, what if I wrote a book which combining business stuff and spirituality stuff? And it kind of went to the back burner. But because I think there was a lot of crossover, man. Like
Definitely. Do you read Tej Dosa's stuff?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been following him, and I follow a lot of people from Money Twitter. So I don't know if everybody's aware of Money Twitter on Facebook, but there's a corner of Twitter called Money Twitter. But there's loads of accounts on there. So one of the accounts I followed about a couple of years ago was Tej Dosa. He mainly started off with copywriting. I mean, I learned a lot from him from copywriting. And I joined his email list, and then he had a paid subscription, and then he moved away from, he still talks about marketing and copywriting, but then he spent a lot of time talking about spirituality, and to be fair, he's probably reignited my passions. Obviously I was into this stuff about 10-15 years ago, kind of forgot about it, came across his stuff, and then I'm like, oh, I remember reading about stuff like this, and it's interesting. And the way he puts it out, it is heavily connected with business, with performance. For him, it's this spiritual stuff puts him into a flow state, and from that flow state, he produces better work, better content, makes more money, lives a happier, more fulfilled life. So there definitely is a connection. And it's not just about becoming a spiritual outcast and then completely neglecting the material world. There is major benefits going down this. And I think for me, the major benefit really is it's doing good in the material world, but then having that inner satisfaction and inner fulfillment, where, because you see a lot of people who are really materialistic, they've got a lot of money, they're millionaires, but they're depressed, they're anxious, they're unfulfilled. And I think spirituality is what fills that gap of fulfillment.
Well, that's similar to what you said. You make heaven and hell in your own mind, right? Tej. I always thought it was Tej, but
Tej might be.
I think first of all, there's wild science around how more productive you are when you're in a flow state. You're like 500% more productive, more creative, more able to solve problems better. There's some really you can tie a tangible value to a lot of spirituality stuff, right? And some of the stuff that we teach our clients is very basic mindset stuff around like affirmations, even, which I used to be completely against not that long ago. I remember the first time I did them, I had a list of like 100 affirmations, and I was sitting there going through them, and I had a cat at the time. My cat was like looking at me like, who are you talking to? I was saying them out loud. It was like 100. It took me 15 minutes. And I was like, right before bed. And I was like, it felt so stupid doing this. Like, I'm just trying it as part of this, what my coach told me to do. And then I went to sleep. I laid down, and I felt like electricity. Like my chest was like vibrating. I was like, what's going on? It was completely weird, because I got into this stuff really deep when I was 20 for like maybe 2 years, and then life, not even 2 years, maybe 1 year. And then life kind of took over, as it does. And then when I was back into kind of freelancing, I kind of rediscovered it as well. Right. So I quickly wrap up on my story with Joe Dispenza.
Yeah.
Because I remember I was reading this book, and I was like, business was kind of slow at this time. And I was like sitting there doing the exercises, like practicing gratitude for something that hasn't happened yet, and feeling that emotion in my body. And I was like, it would be really great if I had $10,000 right now. Right. And maybe like a week later, if that, boom, there's like $10,000 in my account. Basically, we made an offer to the market, and it was like a week later that there was like 10K sitting in my account, which I'm not sure if I credit more to the marketing and sales or the Joe Dispenza stuff, but it definitely helped. I think it definitely helped.
Well, I think that's what people don't. I suppose that's the missing step. So people read The Secret and they visualize and they think that's it. No, well, no. Visualization only works if you obviously you believe wholeheartedly, but then you take action based on that conviction. Obviously, you did the visualization, but then you did your marketing. And there might be an argument to say that you didn't need to do the visualization. You could have just done the marketing, but would you have done the marketing the way you did the marketing if you didn't do the visualization in the first place? It's kind of like putting yourself in a state of mind, taking action based on that state of mind, and then seeing the result. So I think the two do go hand in hand. Now, that's not to say, people still might just get results from not doing affirmations and visualization and just doing marketing, which is fair enough. But I think that, personally, I do believe there's a lot more into it. The affirmations and visualizations do work. But if you take the requisite action, if you're just going to do them, sit in your bed, meditate, and then hope 10 grand's just going to land in your account, it's not going to work that way.
I'll tell you a quick little thing that I kind of started like a mindset. I'm not sure if you call it a mindset trick or what, but you think of like an equation, like I'm right here. This is my current me. Here's what I want, this goal over here. I know if as an equation, if it's like where I'm at plus some kind of plan, doing action, plus time equals getting this result. One day I thought, okay, like what if you just assumed that, okay, if I 100%, if I do this action and I do it enough, I'm going to get the result. And you took time out of the equation so that as soon as you started doing something, you knew you're going to get the result and there was no doubt in your mind, would it help? Right? Because I think a lot of people, they get a plan, they get a strategy, right? Like, hey, okay, I'm going to make an agency and work with dentists or whatever, right? And then here's exactly what you need to do. I can tell you exactly what you need to do, right? But then as you start doing it, doubt starts creeping in. It's like, is this really what I want to do? Should I pick somebody else? Is this actually going to work for me? Like there's all this like head trash, which I think slows down the process. And if you can just remove that and just have 100% faith that it will work, given time, given the reps, putting in like doing the actual stuff, it makes your chances of actually getting the result like 100 times more likely.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, again, this links to, because you mentioned the word faith there, so it links to spirituality and religion, because if you believe in God, like I believe in God, if you believe in God, you're not worried about what could go wrong or yada, yada, yada. You've got faith in God, you've got good intentions, and then you take action based on that. Whereas the opposite of that is stress, fear, anxiety, and I suppose the battle between good and evil is positive energy on one side, negative on the other side, peace on one side, fear, stress on the other side. So I suppose, it all at some level it links together. Whether you're willing to put all the pieces together is a different story. But yeah, I mean, I think we'll wrap it up there because I think we've gone for about an hour now.
Yeah, for sure.
And like I said, we'll put it out and then see what the response is. But even still, I think it'd be good to do a couple more of these because this, like I said, this was for the audience. This was just impromptu. We thought we'll just get on and see where it goes. And that's what we did. And then, maybe if we get some questions from people, we can answer those questions. If not, we'll just go on. Because like I said, I'll probably write some stuff down for next time. Because, because I've got books on magic. I mean, like legitimate books on magic. So how to practice magic. And which again, that's something which is forbidden in Islam as well. But I'm not saying I practice magic. I just read upon it and find it interesting. But yeah, any last words before we wrap up? Or at least let people know where they can.
I say wherever you post this, if you guys want to hear more stuff like this, either message me. I'm easiest to find on Facebook or Twitter, I guess. Ben Byrne, Byrne, or you, just let us know. I'm more than happy to do it and talk about all kinds of stuff. I think we just scratched the surface.
Yeah. So I'll just echo those sentiments. If you've got any questions, if you've got any comments, let us know. Either of us. I mean, Ben, you can easily approach him on Facebook. Same with me. I'm pretty much on every platform, which I shouldn't be, but I'm pretty much on every platform. Let us know if there's anything specific you want us to talk about. Because like Ben said, that we are just scratching the surface, and I could get much deeper if I'm prompted. And I'm sure you could too. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we'll leave it there. So audience, will speak to you in the next episode. Take care. Bye-bye.